What is up guys, it's Cal, and in this video we'll be going over Fury Warriors in the Battle for Azeroth Beta and what has changed from live. And there are quite a few changes. We're going to be talking about the baseline abilities plus passives, as well as the talent and PvP talents. Now the point of this video is not to tell you which talents to pick for the best DPS, or if Fury is better than ARMS at DPS. This is just to show you what's to come, so let's get started. So here are all the baseline abilities for Fury Warriors. Now let's go through them. Heroic Leap is unchanged. You still leap to a location, 45-second cooldown, and it still does some physical damage to enemies within 8 yards of you. Intimidating Shout is also unchanged. Still has a 1.5 minute cooldown, and it causes enemies around you to cower, flee, they're disoriented, whatever. Piercing Howl is also unchanged. Still costs 10 rage. Snares all enemies within 15 yards of you, reducing their movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. And Rage Regeneration is also unchanged. Still a 2-minute cooldown, reduces the damage that you take by 30%, and Bloodthirst restores an additional 20% health usable while stunned, lasts 8 seconds. Now Rallying Cry is returning. This was Commanding Shout. In fact, before it was Commanding Shout, it was Rallying Cry. They changed it to, what was it, Commanding Shout and Legion, and now they're changing it back to Rallying Cry. And it was rewarded, though ultimately I'm pretty sure it does the same thing. Still a 3-minute cooldown. Lets loose a Rallying Cry, granting all party or raid members within 40 yards 15% temporary and maximum health for 10 seconds. So you still get that temporary max health, and then after 10 seconds it goes away. Berserker Rage is unchanged. Still a 1-minute cooldown. You go Berserk, and it removes all immunities to fear, sap, incapacitating effects for 6 seconds. Now Whirlwind did get a slight nerf to it. You still deal damage to all enemies within 8 yards for physical damage. It causes your next Bloodthirst or Rampage to strike up to 4 additional targets for 40% damage. I believe on live that is 50% damage. Heroic Throw is unchanged. Still a 6-second cooldown. You throw your weapon at a target, dealing physical damage, and it generates high threat. Recklessness is returning, kind of. I mean, this did used to be called Battle Cry. It has the same icon, but then they changed the name back to Recklessness. Its cooldown is going from 1 minute up to 1.5 minutes, and it kind of does different things. Let's lose a Battle Cry, increasing all rage generation by 100% and granting your abilities 20% increased critical strike chance for 10 seconds. So it's a bit different than what Battle Cry did before. And then with Charge, really the only change to Charge is that it won't reduce the target's movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. They did take that out. It still generates 20 rage. I believe your artifact weapon made that go up to 35 rage, but you won't have your artifact weapon anymore. So it's still at the base 20. Now Bloodthirst is getting a slight nerf. It pretty much does the same thing. Still is a 3.9, or actually whatever second cooldown that's dependent on your haste. You deal physical damage to the target and you restore 4% of your health, but it will now generate 8 rage, whereas on live that is 10 rage, I believe. Now Raging Blow is getting buffed, so as you see it has 2 charges. So it has a 6-ish, 7-ish second to recharge dependent on your haste. A Mighty Blow that you deal with both weapons, which deals physical damage, which that's the same on live, but Raging Blow does have a 25% chance to instantly reset its own cooldown. It generates 12 rage, whereas on live it's a 5 rage, I believe. And you can also use it whenever. You don't have to be enraged to use Raging Blow. Rampage is unchanged, still costs 85 rage, enrages you and unleashes a series of 5 brutal strikes for a total of that much physical damage. I believe on live that says it does 5 brutal strikes over 2 seconds. But it doesn't say that on BFA. But anyways, it does the same thing. So Furious Slash is pretty much completely changed. Aggressively strikes with your offhand weapon for that much physical damage, and has a 10% chance to enrage you, and it will generate rage now. It generates 4 rage when you use it. Execute is pretty severely changed. It now has a cooldown, which is based on your haste. Attempts to finish off a wounded foe, causing physical damage only usable on enemies that have less than 20% health. That is pretty much the same as live. And it no longer costs rage. It will now generate 20 rage. And remember, you won't have your artifact weapon anymore, so just like spamming rage doesn't increase the damage of the previous rage. But it does have a cooldown, as I mentioned. Whereas on live it has no cooldown. And then Fury is getting Victory Rush again. I believe this was removed from Fury in Legion. And the only change to it really is it still heals you, but it heals you for 20% of your max health now, whereas before it healed the warrior for 30% of their max health. And it's only usable within 20 seconds of killing an enemy that yields experience or honor, which is the same as live. And then Pummel, still the same. That is your interrupt, 15-second cooldown. Taunt, also the same. Why would they change Taunt? Still an 8-second cooldown. Battle Shout is returning for warriors, that's exciting. It's a pretty exciting thing. 15-second cooldown increases the attack power of all raid and party members within 100 yards by 10% for 1 hour. So there are some classes getting class buffs again, which is awesome. Warriors are one of them. Now let's take a look at passive abilities, which are somewhat changed. Enraged is changed. Bloodthirst has a 30% chance to enrage you, so it's not based off Blood Rage's crits anymore. And it will increase your haste by 25% and your movement speed by 10% for 4 seconds. I honestly feel like that's a buff. You can take it as you will. It will no longer increase the damage you take, though, by 20% or whatever it was, which is nice. I always thought that was weird, that Enrage increased your damage taken. I personally did not like that. I don't really know why you would like that, but it no longer will do that. Your Mastery is the same. It will still increase your damage done while enraged, and then Titan's Grip will no longer increases your max health by 15%. That's the only difference. You can still dual wield two-handed weapons. That would be really crappy and weird if they removed that part. But yeah, as mentioned, no longer increases your max health by 15%. And then for the talent, which pretty much has a new thing on every tier, and then I'll go over the PvP talents at the end in case you care about those, since those were added to the beta. For this first tier, War Machine was changed. Your auto attacks generate 10% more rage, and then killing an enemy instantly generates 10 rage and increases your movement speed by 30% for 8 seconds. And this rage was also changed. You will now gain 6 rage whenever you enrage, and then Fresh Meat was changed. Your Bloodthirst has a 15% increased chance to trigger Enrage and heal you for 25% more. So all these abilities, the name should at least look familiar, but as I mentioned, they were all changed. The second tier, Double Time, is unchanged. It increases the max number of charges by 1 and reduces its cooldown by 3 seconds. Impending Victory is coming back because Fury Warriors are getting Victory Rush back. It costs 10 rage, replaces Victory Rush, 30-second cooldown, instantly attacks target, causing damage and healing you for 15% of your max health, and then killing an enemy that yields experience or honor resets the cooldown of Impending Victory. So it does heal you for less than Victory Rush, but you can use it whenever during the fight. Its cooldown is just reset whenever you kill an enemy. And then Stormbolt is unchanged. 30-second cooldown, you throw a hammer at a target, and they get stunned for 4 seconds. Reckless Abandon was moved all the way up to this tier, and it pretty much does the same thing. It just has a text change to Recklessness because Recklessness took over Battlecry, but it still lasts 2 seconds longer and generates 100 rage. Outburst is unchanged. Berserk Rage now causes Enrage, and its cooldown is reduced by 15 seconds. And then Avatar, the only change to Avatar is it will now generate 20 rage whenever you use it. You still deal 20% increased damage and removes all root and snare effects. This next tier, Furious Charge, is unchanged. Charge also increases the healing from your next Bloodthirst by 300%. Bounding Stride is also unchanged, reduces the cooldown on Heroic Leap by 15 seconds, and Heroic Leap now also increases your run speed by 70% for 3 seconds. And then Warp Paint was changed because Enrage doesn't increase the damage you take anymore, so if you pick Warp Paint, you will now take 10% reduced damage whenever you're enraged. For this next tier, Carnage was changed. Rampage costs 10 less rage and deals 10% increased damage. Massacre is unchanged. Execute Critical Strikes reduce the rage cost of your next Rampage by 100%, and then Frothing Berserker was changed. Rampage now costs 95 rage and increases your damage done by 10% and haste by 10% for 6 seconds. So now for this next tier, Inner Rage was not implemented, but what it does on live is Raging Blow no longer requires Inner Rage and deals 150% increased damage with a 4.5 second cooldown. So that's currently what Raging Blow does baseline in BFA, except it has 2 charges, so I guess Inner Rage is just going to do something completely different with Raging Blow, I don't know. Frenzy is unchanged. Fury Slash increases your haste by 5% for 15 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. And then Bloodbath was changed a bit. It now is a 40-second cooldown, up from 30 seconds. And the first effect of it causes Bloodbath, dealing some physical damage to all enemies in front of you. So that's new for BFA, but then the second effect is the same as live. For the next 10 seconds, your melee attacks and abilities cause the target to bleed for 40% additional damage over 6 seconds. Then this final tier, Wrecking Ball, was just moved all the way down to this tier, and it was buffed a bit. Your next Whirlwind will now deal 300% increased damage, up from 250%. Dragon's Roar was changed, still 25-second cooldown, roar explosively, dealing physical damage to all enemies within 8 yards and reducing their movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. I think that's kind of a nerf, but it now reduces enemies' movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. And then Blade Storm is unchanged, become Unstoppable Storm of Destruction, force striking all enemies within 8 yards and both weapons for physical damage over 5.2 seconds. I believe on live that is 5.3 seconds, but what's the difference? 0.1 seconds is the difference. And you're still immune to all movement impairing effects and loss control effects, and you can use defensive abilities and avoid attacks. 1.5 minute cooldown. So as I said, unchanged. And then for the PvP talents, if you did not watch my video going over how PvP talents work, this is how it goes. You got these 4 bubbles here. This top bubble is the same for all classes and all specs. It's Adaptation, Relentless, and Gladiator's Medallion. You can pick between one of these 3. They're all on the same tier as Live, the first tier, and you can pick one of them. And these next 3 bubbles are a giant pool of all of your already existing PvP talents. So it's not on tier system anymore. You can pick just any of these 3 that you want. Now for the Warrior, none of these are actually changed. Some classes do have some slightly changed PvP talents, but Fury Warriors, none of them are changed. So I'm just going to read the names off. If you want to know what they do, you can pause the video or look at your Fury Warriors honor talents. But this is them. There's Death Sentence, Barbarian, Battle Trance, Thirst for Battle, Slaughterhouse, Enduring Rage, Death Wish, Spell Reflection, Death Row, Master and Commander. The thing about this one is that it says the cooldown of Commanding Shout is reduced by 2 minutes. Commanding Shout isn't a thing anymore, obviously. You know, you got Rallying Cry. So just because of that, it makes me think maybe they haven't really touched Fury Warriors PvP talents, just because that name isn't changed there. But it might just be as simple as them changing that Commanding Shout name to Rallying Cry. And then there's Disarm, which does the same thing. And those are all of the PvP talents and normal talents. And there you have it. Those are all the current changes for Battle for Azeroth in the beta for Fury Warriors. Now it is the beta, so things are definitely subject to change before their final release, which is August 14th. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. Do you like these changes or dislike them for all you Fury Warriors out there? But anyways, if you like this video, you can leave a like on it, sub to the channel for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next video.